explain why some people do it and other people don't. We cannot teach you how to do it. The entrepreneur cannot write down a formal mathematical model of how he did it that can then be transmitted to other people and so on. So, a lot of the literature, especially the practical management literature, the books that you find at Barnes & Noble or, in the business section of the airport bookstore, there's Aristotle's Lessons for Leadership and, Donald Rumsfeld on uncertainty and so on. And, there's lots and lots of books about how to be a great entrepreneur. Most of those books probably aren't worth the cover price. If they teach some basic skills, if they teach basic business skills, or if they explain maybe to policymakers why entrepreneurship is so important and why you should leave it alone, okay, well then they might have some value. But you don't teach a person how to be an entrepreneur. That's not a teachable skill in a business school or from a book.
Well, one of the things I'm interested in studying through the AnCap Entrepreneur Network is this idea of people bringing about the free society through their business ventures, being able to anticipate exactly what the market needs are for security and for solving all the other problems that has been monopolized by the government, and looking for opportunities to fill those needs in non-coercive ways.
Absolutely.
So from that point of view, I wonder sometimes, is there any other way to change society except through entrepreneurship, except through offering up your idea of what the future should be, hoping that other people react to that and accept it and help you build it, cooperate with you and trade and associate with you? Is that true, or are there other ways besides entrepreneurship to affect society?
Well, I mean, sure, but not in a good way.
Yeah, okay. Consciously determined society, I guess. Tsunamis affect society.
Look, this is kind of the right. Well, this is the classic, another manifestation of the age-old sort of fundamental debate between reliance on, spontaneous market forces and bottom-up organization, as opposed to government planning and sort of conscious, deliberate, top-down organization. And I'm imagining that everybody who's listening to this discussion is already familiar with that and probably is much more sympathetic to the bottom-up approach than the top-down approach. But I think that's exactly why, look, one of the reasons that entrepreneurship is so important is precisely because we cannot model, predict, or sort of formalize what will be the results of entrepreneurial creativity. We let entrepreneurs loose. We try to provide, an institutional setting in which entrepreneurs can do their thing, and we wait and see what marvels they will come up with. I mean, think of a lot of analogies. Go back in time 10 years or 20 years and try to predict what internet technology would be like, and what how search technology would work, or what telecom would be like. And of course, nobody could have come close to getting it right. Murray Rothbard used to use the following example. He said he was trying to explain why advocates of the free market should not take it upon themselves to have to explain to critics exactly how everything would work in a free society. So, if you want to talk about private law, private justice, private crime, private punishment, adjudication, arbitration, and so on, and the critic says, well, if you had a free market for judicial services, how many firms would there be? What prices would they charge? Would they be big? Would they be small? Rothbard said, look, it's not up to the advocate of the free society to come up with precise answers for that. The burden of proof is not on us to explain exactly what the details would be like. He said, Rothbard said, imagine you lived in a society in which the government had nationalized the shoe industry since the beginning of time. And, no one had ever known a system other than the one in which the government owned all the shoe factories and produced all the shoes and distributed the shoes and so on. And now some crazy libertarian comes along and says, gee, I think we ought to privatize the shoe business. I think the free market could produce shoes. And the critic says, what? Well, okay, fine. If you think that would work, tell me, how many shoe stores would there be? How many shoe companies? What sizes would be offered? What colors would the shoes be? How many different styles of shoes would there be? And so on. Well, of course, nobody could answer those questions, but so what? I mean, we would be confident. The proper response would be, well, I don't know exactly what outcome entrepreneurs would, what outcomes entrepreneurs would create, but I know that by relying on human creativity, unleashing the power of entrepreneurship in the shoe sector, it would lead to outcomes that are vastly superior to that of the government shoe industry because of what we know theoretically about entrepreneurs and markets. So I would say the same thing in terms of the kinds of issues that you're talking about, Mark. So, no, we don't know exactly what private adjudication would look like. There are lots of different models that are out there. But if we allowed entrepreneurship to work, if we unleashed the creative power of the human mind in that area, we can be pretty confident that some very creative solutions, ones that you and I can't even imagine right now, would come along. And it's the fact that there's competition among entrepreneurs who are seeking to earn profits by offering better products and services to consumers than their rivals. I mean, we can be pretty confident that the outcome of that process will be socially desirable, even though we can't predict exactly what the landscape would look like.
Well, that fits in nicely with something I'd like to follow up on. Just before I make my comment, though, I've got a chat window going here, and I'm going to encourage people, if they have any questions for you before we finish off in a few minutes, to put them in the chat window. But one of the things that you said is sort of what I'm hoping that the AnCap Entrepreneur Network can do, rather than try and determine what might happen with society by looking at it from above and saying, this is how all the pieces are fit. Instead, we will be individual nodes within that network. We will each be taking a small piece of one of those problems and saying, here's my opinion of how I think it would work, and here's how I will organize the resources under my control and offer it to others in the market. And then we see what the market response is. We interact in the market, we see if we're successful or not, and we actually become that creative force down inside the market that are making those minute changes that will all add up to getting us closer and closer to what we don't know now what it will end up looking at, but will eventually be a more free society.
Absolutely. And entrepreneurship is limited only by the artificial constraints that the state and other coercive institutions might put on it. And recognizing that it's entrepreneurship that ultimately drives the market and ultimately leads to consumer well-being. If we could get policymakers to understand that, we might be a lot closer to achieving the kind of goals that most of us share. I mean, what's happened in the policy world is, government agencies and the World Bank and so on, they talk a lot about entrepreneurship, and they're starting to get it maybe a little bit, but they still tend to define entrepreneurship far too narrowly. In other words, they mean, letting people start small companies,